You're about to discover 10 powerful money lessons that have been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years, and I guarantee that at least 3 of these principles will completely transform how you think about wealth. But before we dive into these life-changing financial truths, you need to understand why these ancient teachings are more relevant today than they've ever been. Think about it for a moment. We're living in an age where financial stress is at an all-time high. Credit card debt is crushing families, student loans are crippling entire generations, and most people are living paycheck to paycheck despite earning more money than any generation before them. The average American has less than $400 in their savings account, and yet we have access to more financial information and advice than any civilization in human history. So what's going wrong? Here's what's fascinating about this situation. The same book that contains some of the most profound spiritual wisdom ever written also happens to contain the most practical and effective financial advice you'll ever find. These aren't just religious concepts that sound nice in theory. These are battle-tested strategies that have helped countless people build lasting wealth and financial security for over 3,000 years. What I'm about to share with you isn't some get-rich-quick scheme or complicated investment strategy that only works for people with advanced degrees in finance. These are simple, timeless principles that anyone can apply, regardless of their current financial situation. Whether you're drowning in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, or even if you're already doing well financially, these lessons will give you a completely new framework for understanding money. But here's what makes these principles so powerful. They don't just teach you how to make more money. They teach you how to develop the character and mindset that naturally attracts wealth and keeps it growing for generations. You see, most financial advice focuses on tactics and strategies, but these ancient teachings focus on something much deeper. They focus on transforming who you are as a person. Now, I want to be completely transparent with you about something. When I first started studying these financial principles, I was honestly skeptical. I mean, how could a book that was written thousands of years ago possibly contain relevant advice for our modern economy? But as I began to implement these teachings in my own life, something incredible happened. Not only did my financial situation begin to improve dramatically, but I also developed a peace and confidence about money that I had never experienced before. The first lesson that will blow your mind has to do with a principle that most financial experts completely ignore, yet it's mentioned over 800 times in this ancient text. This principle alone has the power to break you out of the poverty mindset that keeps most people trapped in financial mediocrity for their entire lives. But before we get to that first lesson, let me tell you why these 10 principles work so well together. You see, most people try to fix their money problems by focusing on just one area. They think if they can just earn more money or save more money or invest better, then all their financial problems will be solved. But that's like trying to fix a car by only working on the engine while ignoring the transmission, the brakes, and the steering wheel. These 10 biblical money lessons work together as a complete financial system. Each principle builds on the others to create a foundation for lasting wealth that can withstand any economic storm. And the beautiful thing about this system is that it's not dependent on market conditions, government policies, or economic trends. These principles have worked during times of prosperity and times of recession, in agricultural economies and industrial economies, and they're working right now in our digital economy. What's even more amazing is that you don't need to implement all 10 principles at once to start seeing results. Even applying just 1 or 2 of these lessons can create a dramatic shift in your financial trajectory. I've seen people pay off decades of debt, build their first emergency fund, and even start successful businesses just by consistently applying these ancient wisdom principles. Now, here's something that might surprise you about these money lessons. They're not primarily focused on accumulation. In fact, several of these principles will actually challenge the way our culture thinks about wealth and success. Our society teaches us that the goal of money is to accumulate as much as possible so we can buy whatever we want and live however we choose. But these ancient teachings reveal a completely different approach to wealth that leads to much deeper satisfaction and genuine financial security. The first money lesson we're going to explore deals with something that every successful person throughout history has understood, yet most people today completely ignore. This principle is so counterintuitive that when you first hear it, you might think it's the opposite of good financial advice. But I promise you, once you understand the deeper wisdom behind this principle and start applying it consistently, you'll begin to see opportunities and resources flow into your life in ways that will amaze you. This first lesson has to do with the concept of giving when it seems like you can't afford to give. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this is just some religious guilt trip about tithing, hear me out. This principle isn't about obligation or manipulation. It's about understanding a fundamental law of abundance that governs how wealth actually flows in the universe. Here's what most people don't understand about money. Money is not a finite resource that becomes scarce when you share it. Money is actually a form of energy that multiplies when it's put into motion. When you give money away strategically and consistently, you're not depleting your resources. You're actually creating a circulation system that brings more resources back to you, often in unexpected ways. Think about this for a moment. Every wealthy person you can think of became wealthy by providing value to other people. They gave something first before they received anything in return. They invested their time, energy, money, or expertise into creating something that benefited others, and wealth flowed back to them as a natural result. This isn't just a nice philosophical concept. This is literally how wealth creation works in the real world. But here's where most people get stuck. They wait until they have excess money before they start giving. They think to themselves, once I pay off my debts, or once I build up my savings account, or once I'm making more money, then I'll start being generous. But this approach actually keeps them trapped in a scarcity mindset that repels wealth rather than attracting it. The ancient wisdom teaches us to start giving immediately, even when it seems impossible. Even if you can only give a small amount, the act of giving when you don't feel like you can afford it breaks the power of fear and scarcity over your financial life. It demonstrates faith in your ability to create value and attract resources, and that faith becomes a magnet for opportunities. Now, this doesn't mean you should give away money you need for basic necessities or go into debt to be generous. That's not wisdom, that's foolishness. But it does mean that you should prioritize giving as one of your first financial habits, not your last. When you make giving a non-negotiable part of your financial plan, something shifts in your relationship with money that opens up possibilities you never imagined. I've seen this principle work in my own life and in the lives of countless others who have applied it consistently. People who start giving regularly, even small amounts, often report that they begin to notice opportunities they had been blind to before. They develop relationships that lead to better jobs or business partnerships. They gain insights and ideas that help them solve financial problems or create new income streams. But the second money lesson we're going to explore is equally powerful, and it deals with a habit that separates wealthy people from everyone else. This second lesson has everything to do with delayed gratification, and it's a principle that will literally determine whether you build wealth or stay broke for the rest of your life. But here's what makes this ancient teaching so brilliant. It doesn't just tell you to wait for things you want, it gives you a specific strategy for turning your waiting into wealth multiplication. The principle is simple but profound. Before you buy anything that's not a basic necessity, you wait and put the money aside first. Not after you buy it, not while you're buying it, but before you even consider making the purchase. This sounds almost too basic to be life-changing, but let me show you why this one habit has created more millionaires than any investment strategy ever could. When you consistently practice this principle, three incredible things happen simultaneously. First, you discover that most of the things you thought you desperately needed were actually just temporary desires that fade away when you give them time. Second, you build up substantial amounts of money that would have otherwise been spent on things you've already forgotten about. And third, you develop the mental discipline that's absolutely essential for building lasting wealth. But here's where this gets really interesting. The ancient text doesn't just tell you to save money. It tells you to make your money work for you while you're waiting. This is where the real magic happens. Instead of just putting money in a regular savings account where it sits doing nothing, you put it into something that grows while you're deciding whether you really want to make that purchase. Think about how powerful this becomes over time. Let's say you want to buy something that costs $500. Instead of buying it immediately, you put that $500 into an investment or savings vehicle that earns a return. After a few months, you might realize you don't actually want that item anymore. But now you have $550 instead of $500, plus you still have the thing you would have bought it to replace. This principle works for small purchases and large purchases alike. Want a new phone? Put the money aside first and let it grow. Want a new car? Same thing. Want to take an expensive vacation? You get the idea. But what's really amazing is how this habit trains your brain to think like a wealthy person instead of a poor person. Poor people see money as something to spend. Wealthy people see money as something that creates more money. When you consistently practice this delay principle, you start to see every dollar as a seed that can be planted to grow more dollars, rather than just something to exchange for temporary pleasure. The third money lesson deals with something that most people completely misunderstand about debt, and it could save you decades of financial struggle. The ancient wisdom makes a clear distinction between debt that makes you wealthy and debt that makes you poor. But most people today have it completely backwards. Here's what the teaching reveals. Not all debt is bad debt. There's actually a type of debt that wealthy people use strategically to build more wealth faster than they ever could without it. But there's also a type of debt that will keep you trapped in financial bondage for your entire life. And unfortunately, this is the type of debt that most people accumulate without even realizing how destructive it is. The ancient text warns specifically about borrowing money to buy things that decrease in value or things that don't produce income. This includes credit card debt for consumer purchases, car loans for vehicles that lose value the moment you drive them off the lot, and any other debt that's used to fund your lifestyle rather than build your wealth. But here's what's fascinating. The same ancient wisdom that warns against destructive debt also provides examples of productive debt. Debt that's used to acquire assets that produce income, debt that's used to build businesses that serve others, and debt that's used to develop skills or capabilities that increase your earning potential. The key is understanding the difference between debt that takes money out of your pocket every month and debt that puts money into your pocket every month. When you borrow money to buy something that generates more income than it costs to maintain, you're using debt as a tool for wealth building. But when you borrow money to buy things that only create monthly payments without producing income, you're using debt as a tool for wealth destruction. These 10 ancient money principles have withstood the test of time for one simple reason: they work. Whether you start with giving, practice delayed gratification, or understand the difference between good and bad debt, each lesson builds upon the others to create a financial foundation that can weather any storm. The choice is yours. You can continue following the financial advice that's led most people into debt and stress, or you can apply these time-tested principles that have been creating wealth for thousands of years.